Nadia Orin had spent the last 6 years learning that the most dangerous thing in any room was a fat woman people had already decided not to see. At 263 pounds, she moved through the Callaway Grand the way water moves through a cracked pipe, quietly, efficiently, invisible to everyone who wasn't looking for a leak. She was 26 years old. Her shoes were orthopedic, her uniform a size 20, her tips just enough to cover the bus pass and the electric bill and the half carton of eggs she'd been stretching since Tuesday. The hotel was one of those old Chicago institutions. Marble floors, brass fixtures, the kind of place that had a name for everything and a place for everyone. And Nadia's place was behind the service cart, moving down the 14th floor corridor at 6:45 in the morning before the guests woke up and noticed the staff existed. She liked it that way, mostly. She'd grown up in Pilsen, the second of 4 kids, in a 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner that her mother ran 6 days a week. Her father left when she was 9. Not dramatically, no scene. No argument anyone remembers. He just stopped coming home one Tuesday, and that was the end of it. Nadia learned early that people disappear when holding on costs more than leaving. She learned to cook, to stretch a dollar, to fix what was broken before anyone noticed it needed fixing. She graduated top of her class at Morton High, got a partial scholarship to DePaul, lost it after her sophomore year when her mother's back gave out and someone had to work full-time. She told herself she'd go back. She told herself that every year. By 26, she had 3 things: a studio apartment in Bridgeport with a radiator that only worked when it felt like it, a reputation among the housekeeping staff as the woman who could de-escalate any situation, and a working knowledge of 7 languages that she had never once mentioned to her employer. That last part is where this story actually begins. The Callaway Grand hosted the Volkov-Dragici Summit every March. That was the polite name for it, what the general manager called it when he briefed the staff, what was printed on the event booking sheet, what was stamped on the service order for the private dining floor. Nadia had worked it twice before. She knew what it really was. 2 criminal organizations, one from eastern Ukraine, one from Romania, sitting across a table to divide a city between them like men cutting a pie. She wasn't supposed to know that. She knew it because she listened, because she spoke Ukrainian on her mother's side, because her grandmother in Kharkiv had kept her on the phone every Sunday for 20 years, and language, real language, had a way of getting into your bones when someone you loved spoke it. She kept what she knew to herself. In 6 years of hospitality work, she had learned one rule above all others. The guests are never wrong, not because they are right, because they can make your life very, very small if you disagree. The summit was a 3-day affair. Private dining room on the 14th floor, 6 bodyguards posted outside at all times, a standing order from management that the service staff be rotated every 4 hours to reduce exposure. Nadia was not supposed to be assigned to it at all. She was a floor attendant, not a dining room server, but Keisha, who was supposed to cover the early shift on day 2, called in with a fever, and the shift supervisor, a nervous man named Gary who sweated through his collar before noon on a good day, had looked at the roster and landed on Nadia's name because she was the only one available who had a clean service record. Just coffee and the bread basket. Gary had said, not quite meeting her eyes. In and out. Don't engage. She nodded. She took the cart. She did not know, when she pushed open the service door at 7:12 in the morning, that the man sitting at the head of the table, the one with his back to the window and the grey starting at his temples, and the way of sitting very still that powerful men sometimes have, as if they have learned that movement is for people who aren't sure of themselves, would change the next chapter of her life entirely. She did not know his name yet, though she would learn it: Milo Dragici. 40 Romanian-born, Chicago-based since 1998, the kind of man whose name appeared in 3 federal investigative files and 0 criminal convictions. He ran a logistics company on paper and a distribution network in practice, and he had more people loyal to him than most small governments. She didn't know any of that yet. She knew the coffee was hot, the basket needed a new linen, and the man at the end of the table was watching her, the way a person watches something that doesn't add up. She set down the coffee service. She replaced the bread basket liner, with the efficiency of someone who has done a task 10,000 times and stopped thinking about it 5,000 in. She was reaching for the empty cream pitcher when she heard it, low, deliberate, meant for the man across from Dragici, a sharp-faced Ukrainian named Bohdan, who Nadia recognized by voice alone from the previous year's summit. What Bohdan said, in Ukrainian, was this: "Does the hotel send us the cow on purpose? Or is this just their idea of a joke?" The men around the table laughed, low, comfortable, the laughter of people in a room where they are certain no one can understand them. Nadia set the cream pitcher down. She picked up the empty coffee carafe. For exactly 4 seconds she stood with her back half-turned to the table and felt the heat move up through her chest, the particular heat that 26 years of being looked at and found wanting produces in a body. Not anger, not quite. Something older and quieter and more dangerous than anger. The part of her that had survived her father leaving, and the scholarship evaporating, and every man who had ever looked through her in a room did not flinch. It had stopped flinching years ago. She turned around. She looked directly at Bohdan, and in clean, unhurried Ukrainian, the kind her grandmother spoke. Regional, specific, the dialect of a city, not a textbook, she said, "The cow would like to know if you'd prefer the dark roast or the medium blend, though given the quality of your last comment, perhaps something to sweeten your morning would serve you better." The room went the kind of quiet that has texture to it. The laughter stopped mid-breath in the men who were still exhaling from it. Bohdan's face did something complicated, moved through surprise and landed somewhere close to alarm. 2 of the bodyguards shifted weight, which was the only movement anyone made. Milo Dragici, at the head of the table, did not laugh. He had not laughed before either. He was watching Nadia with an expression she could not immediately classify, not the shock the others wore, something more considered than that, as if he was recalculating something he'd thought was already settled. "Dark roast," he said in English, very quiet. "Please." She poured his coffee. She left the room. Her hands did not shake until she was back behind the service door, and she was grateful no one was in the corridor to see it. Gary found her 40 minutes later in the linen closet, refolding napkins that did not need refolding. "Whatever you said in there," he started. "I asked if they wanted dark or medium roast," she said, in Ukrainian. Mr. Volkov's team appeared to be speaking it. I was being accommodating. Gary looked at her for a long moment. "The tall one, Bohdan. He requested a different server, I understand. The other one, Dragici. He requested you specifically for the remainder of the summit." She set down the napkin she was folding. "He said," Gary continued, reading from his phone with the look of a man encountering something he does not have a protocol for, that he found the service satisfactory and wished to maintain consistency. Gary looked up. "Nadia, I'm not sure what that means operationally. It means he wants the same person bringing his coffee," she said. "I can do that." She did not tell Gary about the Ukrainian. She had not told anyone about the Ukrainian, or the Romanian she'd picked up from a neighbor in Pilsen who ran a bakery and talked to herself while she worked, or the Russian from her grandmother's sisters, or the French from the DePaul professor who'd given her a stack of novels when she left and said, "You'll finish the degree in your own time. Just don't stop reading." She had not told anyone because no one had asked, and she had learned early and thoroughly that the things you know are worth more when other people don't know you know them. For the next 2 days, she brought Milo Dragici his coffee. He was, she observed, a precise man. He drank the same thing at the same time each morning. He read physical documents, never a phone, while he waited for his associates to arrive. He had manners that were real, not performed, thanked her each time, looked at her when he spoke, which in Nadia's experience was rarer in that tax bracket than people liked to pretend. He did not speak to her beyond the transactional. She did not speak to him. On the third morning, when she set down his cup and turned to go, he said, still looking at his documents, "Where did you learn it?" She stopped. "Ukrainian," he said. "Not textbook. Regional. Kharkiv, if I had to guess." "My grandmother," she said. He looked up then. "Kharkiv," he confirmed. Not a question. Yes. "My mother was from Kharkiv," he said before. She didn't ask before what, in her experience before in that context was its own complete sentence and did not require a subject. "The medium blend is better than the dark this morning," she said. "The beans are from a different supplier. You might prefer it." He looked at her for a moment. "Leave both." She left both. On the afternoon of the third day, a situation developed. She heard it from 3 rooms away, raised voices in the corridor outside the private dining room, the specific pitch of men who have been managing themselves for hours and are no longer managing. She was pushing her cart toward the service elevator when she caught the shape of it. Bodan, still in the building apparently, 2 of his men, and one of the hotel's younger bellmen, a kid named Tyrese, 20 years old, who had started in January and still flinched when the phone rang, backed against the wall outside a supply closet. She did not know exactly what the dispute was. She pieced together enough. Tyrese had apparently walked in on a conversation he shouldn't have. One of Bodan's men had his hand on Tyrese's collar. Nadia walked over. She was aware that this was an objectively unwise decision. She was a housekeeping attendant 2 days from her annual review. She was not security. She was not management. She was 263 pounds of woman in orthopedic shoes who had been told, her entire life, to make herself smaller and quieter and easier to overlook. She stopped her cart directly in Bodan's path, which was not an accident, and looked at the man holding Tyrese's collar. In Ukrainian, she said, "Let the boy go. What he saw, he doesn't understand. And if you make a scene on this floor, your boss's name ends up in a police report attached to this hotel," which is the opposite of quiet. The man holding Tyrese looked at her with the blankness of someone who has never had a fat woman in a hotel uniform address him in his own language before. Bodan, to his credit, understood immediately. He said something clipped to his man. The hand released Tyrese's collar. Bodan looked at Nadia for a long moment with an expression she recognized as being approximately the same one she'd worn after the first summit morning. Reassessment. "Who are you?" he said in Ukrainian. "Careful now, not contemptuous. I'm the woman who brings the coffee," she said, in English because she was done performing. "And this floor is mine. I'd like you to take your conversation somewhere else." They left. Tyrese straightened his jacket. He was shaking slightly. He was trying not to show it. Nadia asked, What did you say to them?" "I told them you hadn't seen anything interesting." "I didn't," he said. "I genuinely didn't. I was looking for the—" "I know," she said. "Go take your break. Get some water. Don't come back to this floor for the rest of the shift." He went. She pushed her cart to the service elevator and rode down to the 4th floor and stood very still for a moment, with her forehead against the cool metal wall, and let her heartbeat find its way back to something reasonable. That evening someone knocked on the break room door. It was not Gary. Gary had gone home at 4. It was one of Dragici's men, young, broad-shouldered, with the neutral expression of a man whose job was to be present without being interesting. He said without inflection, "Mr. Dragici would like to speak with you." "He has my manager's number," Nadia said. "He'd like to speak with you directly." She looked at the man for a moment. She thought about Tyrese. She thought about the way Bodan had recalibrated after she'd spoken, the specific silence that settles over a room when it realizes it has been wrong about something. "Give me 10 minutes," she said. She finished her coffee. She changed out of her work apron. She found Milo Dragici in the small conference room at the end of the 14th floor corridor, the one the hotel used for private meetings, with the frosted glass door and the table that seated 6. He was alone. 2 of his men were outside. He was reading, as he always seemed to be reading. He looked up when she came in. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing," she said. "I've been standing for 10 hours. Sitting actually hurts more at this point." Something crossed his face, not quite a smile. He set down his document. "Bodan told me what happened this afternoon. The boy hadn't seen anything worth worrying about. That's not the part I'm referring to." He looked at her steadily. He had dark eyes, the kind that missed very little. "You put yourself between one of my rival's men and a hotel employee in a corridor where no one would have seen anything happen. Tyrese is 20 years old," she said. He was scared. You weren't, she thought about it honestly. I was. But being scared doesn't mean you do nothing. Milo Dragici was quiet for a moment. He had the particular stillness of someone who was genuinely thinking rather than performing thought. "What's your name?" he said. "Nadia Orin. How many languages?" 7, functionally. 2 more I can read but wouldn't trust in a real conversation. Where did you learn them? She gave him the honest answer because she was tired and because, for some reason, in this room with this man who had already heard her speak in his mother's dialect, performing modesty felt like an insult to both of them. She told him about her grandmother, about the Romanian neighbor with the bakery, about the DePaul professor and the stack of novels. About the 2 years of Russian she'd added herself because it was close enough to Ukrainian to be worth the effort, and the French she'd learned because the novels were in French and she wanted to read them without a dictionary getting in the way. He listened. He didn't interrupt, which was unusual. Men in her experience interrupted as a way of establishing that they already knew things, whether or not they did. "You were a student," he said when she finished. "For 2 years. Why did you stop?" "Someone had to work." "And you didn't go back?" "Not yet," she said. The yet came out before she thought about it. He looked at her for a moment. "What were you studying?" "International relations," she said, with a concentration in conflict negotiation. The silence in the room shifted. She saw him take that in, not surprise exactly, but the settling of something that had almost made sense finally clicking into place. "That's why you came over," he said, "in the corridor. I came over because a kid was scared and I was the only person nearby." "But you knew what to say." "I knew that the loudest thing in the room for Bodan was the risk of exposure. I addressed the risk." "It's not complicated." "It is, actually," he said, and his voice had something in it she hadn't heard there before. "Most people don't know what the loudest thing in a room is. Most people don't even listen for it." She didn't have a response to that, so she said nothing. "I have a proposition," he said. "I have a job," she said. "You're wasted at it." That landed harder than it should have. Not because it was unkind, it wasn't. Because it was accurate, and she knew it, and she had spent 6 years choosing not to think about it too directly. "What are you proposing?" she said. "I travel frequently. Negotiations, meetings, the kind of situations where what someone says in their own language to the person next to them is often more useful than what they say to me directly. I've used professional translators. They're good. They're also identifiable, and they come with their own loyalties." He looked at her. "I'm looking for someone who is good with language, better with people, and, based on what I observed this morning and again this afternoon, someone who doesn't lose their head when a room gets complicated. You're asking me to translate for a criminal organization." She said. He didn't flinch at the word. She respected that. "I'm asking you to work for me as a liaison and interpreter. The nature of my business is what it is. I have a mother," she said, "a sister in community college. 2 brothers. I'm aware that you have people. That's not a disqualification. It's a consideration." "Yes," he said, "it is." He reached into his jacket pocket and set a card on the table. Plain, just a number. Think about it. You have 2 weeks. If you're not interested, I won't reach out again. She looked at the card. She did not pick it up. She said, "What happens when the answer I translate isn't the one you want to hear?" "Then I expect you to tell me the one you heard," he said, accurately. "Even if it's inconvenient." She picked up the card. She said, "I need Tyrese to keep his job. Whatever reporting comes out of today, his name isn't in it." Dragici looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Done." She put the card in her pocket. She did not call for 11 days. In those 11 days, she worked her regular shifts and avoided the 14th floor, which had been returned to normal service rotation. She thought about the card at 4 in the morning when the radiator banged itself awake, and she lay on her back staring at the ceiling. She thought about her grandmother's voice, that specific Kharkiv cadence, the way certain words had weight in that dialect that they lost in standard Ukrainian, the way language carried history in it, whether you wanted it to or not. She thought about the DePaul professor who'd given her the novels and said, "You'll finish the degree in your own time." She thought about Bodan's face when she'd spoken, not the contempt from the first morning, but the second expression, the one that came after, when he'd realized the room had changed shape, and he hadn't noticed until it was already different. She thought about what it meant to make yourself small enough that a room full of powerful men forgot you were there. She thought about 11th day. She called the number. On the 11th day, he picked up on the second ring. "I have conditions," she said. "I'd expect nothing less," he said. She told him the conditions. Some of them he accepted immediately. 2 he negotiated. 1, the one about her mother's medical insurance, he said he'd have sorted within the week, and she believed him not because she trusted him entirely, but because she had by then developed a working theory about Milo Dragici. He was a man who valued precision. He said what he meant what he said. In her experience, that was rarer than being honest. "One more thing," she said. "Yes, if you ever speak about my weight or my appearance in a professional context, any context, we're done." "Immediately." A pause. "Then, I hadn't planned," she said. "Then we won't have a problem." She gave the Callaway Grand 2 weeks' notice. Gary seemed relieved, which she found faintly amusing. She bought her mother a new pair of work shoes and her sister a chemistry textbook she'd been borrowing from the library. She called her grandmother in Kharkiv and spoke for 2 hours, which was normal, and did not mention what she was doing, which her grandmother would have pretended not to worry about, and then worried about for the rest of the winter. Her first assignment was in Vienna, a preliminary negotiation between Dragici's network and a Belgian logistics company that had decided, wrongly, as it turned out, that it could undercut their arrangement with a port authority in Antwerp by dealing directly. The Belgian representatives spoke French to his associate and Flemish Dutch on his phone and English to Dragici's face. Nadia sat at the table and listened to all 3 versions, and at the appropriate moment, when the Belgian said something in Flemish to the man beside him that was not quite a threat but was definitely a position, she said quietly to Dragici in Romanian. She'd added Romanian on the plane, spending 8 hours with an audio course, and the radio dialect recordings she'd downloaded before departure. "He's told his man they can walk. He thinks you need this more than he does." Dragici had looked at her for 1 second. Then he had turned to the Belgian and made a counteroffer so precisely calibrated to the Belgian's actual bottom line that the man had gone briefly pale. The meeting concluded in 40 minutes rather than 4 hours. The Belgian signed. On the way out in the elevator, Dragici said, "You added Romanian. I had 8 hours on the plane. To a functional level, I had a base," she said. "The structure isn't far from French in places. I had gaps. I filled the gaps." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's actually extraordinary." "It's what I do," she said. because it was true, because she had been doing it her whole life, finding the gaps in things and filling them quietly, without announcement, just filling them because that was the work and the work needed doing. It's what you're paying me for. The elevator opened on the lobby floor. The marble was a different color than the Callaway Grand, warmer, older, the kind that had been walked on long enough to hold the shape of it. She stepped out. He matched her pace. "Next week is Moscow," he said. "Then a 10-day break. I'll need the briefing files by Thursday," she said. "You'll have them Wednesday." She nodded. She did not think about the radiator that had banged its way through 6 Chicago winters. She did not think about the scholarship she hadn't finished, or the degree she hadn't gotten, or the career she'd redirected around a family crisis at 20 years old. She thought, instead, about her grandmother's voice, the rolling R's, the specific weight of certain words in that Kharkiv dialect, and about what it meant that the language you learned from the people you loved turned out to be the most useful thing you ever acquired. She walked through the lobby of a Vienna hotel at 38 years younger than the most powerful man in the room, and 263 pounds and heels that were still orthopedic because she'd earned the right to practical shoes. She walked like she knew where she was going. She did.